Adrian Woods. I'm the president of the Iota Zeta chapter of Zeta Phi Beta Sorority Incorporated. And I want to first thank you all for attending our first Shattering the Silence Domestic Violence Forum. Definitely hope that we are able to shed some light through various lenses, as Jasmine described, which what happened through the night, and definitely hope that everyone is able to learn a lot more from this very, very important and intense topic. So, without further ado, I'll actually pass it back over to Jasmine. But again, I just want to say thank you for everyone who is in attendance tonight, and I hope that we all definitely learn something from this event.
Awesome. Thank you, Sora Woods, for that. So before I get into hopping and introducing the panelists and guests that we'll have today, just wanted to shed a couple light on domestic violence here, specifically in the state of Indiana. Over 40% of women in Indiana and over 26% of men in Indiana experience intimate partner physical violence or sexual violence in their lifetime. Over the years, back in 2014, our domestic violence programs in the state would serve over 18 people per day. So, and when you start looking outside of Indiana and just looking at the United States, 1 in 3 women and 1 in 4 men have also experienced some form of physical violence by a partner. And our hotlines are receiving 21,000 calls per day on average, which is about 15 calls per minute. So this is a very sensitive issue. It's an issue that is impacting our community, and it's really hard and unfortunate to say that you probably know somebody outside of the people you're going to hear from today that has been impacted by domestic violence. And so that's why we're here to raise awareness, but to also talk about how community can help and how different areas of faith and mental health and police and justice system can help our survivors. So first I'm going to introduce our panelist here. I want to start off with Daniette Smith. She is a game changer and survivor of domestic violence and knows the effects it can have on kids and families firsthand. From having a gun placed in her head and told she would be killed if she left, having 2 plates in her eyes currently to hold her cornea in place from being hit, or the side effects it had on her children, she experienced it firsthand. And her passion is to inspire, educate, and bring awareness to families, helping them live the life that they should live with no worries or concerns about teen dating, abuse, domestic violence, and healthy relationships. Next, we have a survivor, Danny Davis. Danielle is your favorite thought leader, compliance and risk expert. As a minority woman with a visual disability, she independently founded Creator Say. It's a virtual creative arts concierge style consulting firm in Terrace Place. It's the #1 online retailer for spiritually awakened. When faced with lemons, she made lemonade, and now it's her literal business to help others do the same in life and in business. We also have with us a poet, Lachelle Bilal, and she's also a survivor. Lachelle Marie Bilal is a 46-year-old divorcee, and her story of domestic violence began when she decided to marry at the young age of 18. At 18, she was searching for her identity and took on the identity of someone else. It was always an unspoken vow to never let anyone know what happened in her home. So the violence was never spoken of. She says, I allowed things to just happen and kept telling myself there would be better days, but those days with her spouse never came. I stayed in an abusive relationship for 15 years and finally made a decision that I wanted a healthy life. Next up, we have Linnell Beatty. She is a spiritual care manager for the southern region of Ascension St. Francis. Linnell is an ordained minister and currently serves as the manager of spiritual care of the southern region of Ascension St. Vincent. It was in July of 2008 when Linnell's family was changed forever when her husband's only sister's life was ended due to domestic violence. We also have Danica Carpenter. She is a behavioral health initiative lead for Care Source Georgia Market. She works to develop and implement initiatives for providers that focuses on suicide, substance suicide, substance use, and pharmacy lock-in to improve health outcomes for CareSource members. Danica has 15 years of experience as a mental health professional and working with clients providing therapy in individual, group, and family therapy settings, including school-based counseling, home-based therapy, residential treatment, and adolescent male sex offenders. We have Reverend Eddie Smith. Pastor Eddie came to Tuxedo Park Baptist Church in 2017. He believes in preaching a biblically based life, applicable gospel message. He holds a Bachelor of Arts degree from DePaul University in Chicago and a Master of Divinity from Northern Baptist Theological Seminary in Lisle, Illinois. Pastor Eddie has also studied biblical geography and history at Jerusalem University College in Jerusalem, Israel. And then lastly on the panel, we have Lieutenant Jeffrey Taylor of IMPD. He has 33 years of experience in law enforcement and currently working with IMPD. He is the lieutenant in domestic violence unit and has been in that role for the last 3 years. He's an IU grad and also graduate of the FBI National Academy, as well as a member of Kappa Alpha Psi Fraternity Incorporated. That's going to be our panelists tonight. And hopefully that's as much as you have to hear from me today. I appreciate you guys joining. I'm going to ask, if you are not a panelist, just to please turn off your video so that we can make sure we focus on the panelist here. So I'm going to get us kicked off with a couple of questions. So I'm going to take it to Miss Danielle Smith. You started an organization for domestic violence victims. Can you please tell us more about your organization and what really led you to start?
Definitely. Thank you. Thank you all for the opportunity, and hello everyone. As she stated, I'm Danielle Smith. I went through domestic violence for 10 years. And like she mentioned, having a gun placed to my head, to being choked, to high-speed chases with a shotgun with my best friend going down Arlington Avenue. From there, in about 2012, is when I realized that I was in domestic violence. So even though when that first blow came, I did not know I was in domestic violence. I just knew I wasn't in something good. That's when I learned I was in domestic violence. I was still in it, so I stayed until 2014. And in the midst of that 2012, I said, when I get out of this, I want to help people who are like me. So February 6th of 2014, to get out of my domestic violence, and from there I just didn't look back. I started volunteering with the child advocates to try to get more information and training and help those, but it also built me to where I am today. And now we are Silent No More, and Silent No More serves all. So we serve family as well as teens, bringing domestic violence resources, awareness, and prevention methods, as well as since COVID, we have now been able to do emergency shelter for victims who are fleeing from domestic violence. So that's kind of where we are now, and that's where Silent No More is and what we do. Trying to keep it limited.
Got you. No, it's great to hear the story behind it. I'm actually going to transition over to Danny. Can you share a little bit about your story as a survivor, and what were some of the warning signs that you had, if you had any, as a part of your story?
I think that's a really interesting way that you phrase that question, especially as it pertains to warning signs, because very much like Danielle, I did not realize that is what was happening. And I think a lot of that stemmed from, now I can see in my reflection that that's the situation that I was in. But looking back, a lot of it was being blind to what love actually is. It was being blind to what being strong actually is, and thinking that having a certain level of tolerance is what makes you strong. And that's not what makes you strong. And so I look back, and a lot of people, and I believe there are phases to the way in which you heal and you integrate these things that you go through in life, be it domestic violence or any other traumatic situation. But when you heal and integrate that, you begin to really evolve your perception of that circumstance from being less victim based to, oh my gosh, I can't believe someone did this to me, to looking at ways in which perhaps you could have prevented it. And no, that doesn't make it your fault, but definitely looking at what was my role in that. Like you said, what warning signs were there that I maybe missed, ignored, whatever the situation. And looking back, one was clearly, for me, I can say my mental health. It was my self-esteem. I was not looking at myself properly. I didn't have a whole view and perspective of who I was as a person. I didn't know my inner life in order to realize when it was time to let it shine versus being willing to really close up who I knew I needed to be in those moments and really take up for myself by leaving that situation.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. And I think you bring up a very valid point in terms of your mental health. So I wanna go over to Danica, and as the mental health expert here, what have you seen be the mental health impacts when it relates to not only the victims but also their families as they're going through these situations and trying to get out? Hold on one second. You're muted. If you
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
I was double muted. Sorry about that. Okay, so when it comes to children and their impact, I want to kind of focus on the children and their impact by being exposed to intimate partner violence. So many children that are exposed to the violence in their home are also victims of the physical abuse. And so the children are then at risk for long and short-term problems. And so when you look at like some of the short-term effects, you kind of break it down by age groups for the kids. So if you start in infancy, if an infant is exposed to this intimate partner violence, they will be fussy. They may have a separation, infants and toddlers, intense separation issues, difficulty learning.
Danica, looks like we lost your audio audio there. No, we cannot.
Looking back, one was clearly for me.
Okay, we'll come back to you. I'm sorry we couldn't get the whole of your answer, but we will come back to you once we get the audio figured out. So I'm gonna kick it over to Linnell as we were talking about mental health. Let's kind of kick it over to healthcare. What do you see as the healthcare response or responsibility to victims and families of domestic violence?
So, the responsibility for healthcare is to keep the family and the domestic violence victim safe. And so there are signs that healthcare nurses and other social workers, they look for if there's any suspicion. One of the things, if you've ever been treated in an emergency room, they ask you a question, do you feel safe? Are you fearful of anything? And so I used to joke about that question because my husband would be sitting in the room with me, and I would say to the nurse, well, if I was, I probably wouldn't say anything because he's sitting right here. So let's figure out, y'all need to figure out another way to ask that question. And so it's not just a check off the box type of thing. And so they do, there are ways when the healthcare professionals, if they are suspecting abuse, there are questions, or they'll say, well, I'm sorry, ma'am or sir, can you step out of the room because we need to examine the patient alone with no one in the room. Hospitals also, if a victim shows up at a hospital, there are ways that a lot of people don't know this, but you could tell the hospital you don't want anyone to know that you're there. So at Ascension St. Vincent, that's called do not publish. And if someone was to call the hospital, they would say, I'm sorry, we don't have anyone here by that name. And so a lot of hospitals, they do have that in place, again, to keep the victim safe as well as hospital staff safe.
Thank you so much. So, in speaking of resources that are available or assistance that is available, I'm going to bring in Lieutenant Jeffrey Taylor. You being lieutenant of the domestic violence unit, can you speak more about specifically what does your department do to help victims of domestic violence?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
We're coming through? Okay. Our first responsibility is once the district officer gets there on the scene is to make sure that the victim is okay, and if they need any medical treatment, make sure they get medical treatment. Then you try to establish, okay, is there any kids there? If there's kids there, then make sure that they're safe and make sure that you provide them with all the resources that we have to offer, which normally we would call out a victim assistance officer to come to the scene if the victim would need shelter or the victim is afraid. We also make sure that, again, she would get treatment at the hospital and also try to locate any family members for her. If she needs to be transported away from the scene, make sure that we transport her away from the scene, or him. It can happen to either gender. So our first responsibility is safety. Then we look at, okay, do we have any probable cause here to lock somebody up? And if so, who was the aggressor? Then we go through those steps. Getting statements from the victim, any witnesses, if the kids were there, getting permission from the parent to be able to talk to the kids. That's kind of a sensitive issue because you don't want the kids to be in a situation where either parents say, well, you know, you said this about daddy or you said this about mommy. So that's a very sensitive situation there. Also, officers know the long-term effect that this is going to have, not only on the victim, but the kids seeing this. And so we look at looking to see if we can lock the person up. They say arrest is a deterrent from future domestic violence. You know, we've had a lot of repeat cases, so I'm not 100% convinced about that, but it is a way to get him in jail. At least he or her knows that they're going to get locked up. Then it's important for us to follow up with the victim and walk the victim through the process of prosecution and make sure we communicate with our domestic violence detective will take over, make sure we communicate with the victim and make sure that she or he is okay. If they need anything, make sure we get resources at the shelter. Right now, I'm at the Juliet Center located on Meridian Street. That's one of the shelters that houses victims of domestic violence amongst other shelters within the city. But we try to do everything we can to provide resources to the victim and the children to make sure that they're safe. And then make sure that we aggressively prosecute, make sure we get whoever is responsible for the violence to be locked up, hopefully serve some time. And then you got protection orders, no contact orders that are issued through the courts as well, which I'm sure we can get into that later on as well. So that's what we try to do from our end of the situation. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. I will be following up with you on that as well.
Okay.
But I do want to switch gears and because we have another survivor that's with us. Lachelle, I know that we're going to be hearing some poetry from you, and as a poet, I'm so excited to hear from you. But can you talk to us about your story, and is that what helps inspire your poetry, or use it as an outlet? And you're muted. Hold on 1 second, if you need. Yep, you have to unmute. There you go.
Absolutely, it inspired my poetry. Like you stated before, I got married at a very young age, so I didn't have an identity of who I was, and I took on the identity of my spouse at that time. I wasn't aware of that I was being abused because in my childhood, that's all I was used to was the abuse. So when I got married, I thought it was normal to see this, and I stayed in the relationship for about 15 years till I decided that I wanted something different. The poetry does help me. It is an outlet for me. After my divorce, I found spoken word, and from there on, I have been writing my pain since then. So it is a healing. It heals me as well.
Awesome. Thank you. And I look forward to hearing you. So when it comes, a lot of the stories are people, they keep what's going on in the home to themselves. There's a lot of, don't tell, that's our business. And I think some of that is also rooted in faith as well. And so Pastor Eddie Smith, can you talk about the role that, faith has and how people, talk about or don't talk about what's behind closed doors, or how somebody may not want to leave because it's being seen as breaking their wedding vows and not of God. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, and that's
Eddie Smith. Can you talk
that was a
about
lot.
the role?
I appreciate everyone who has shared their story so far. I've been just in awe. So first and foremost, I think that it's incumbent upon us as the church to lead in this situation, because the church is, I believe, the ultimate community for families and for people. And I, as a leader, take a lot of that responsibility, because I believe it's because of leaders that some of the abuse happens, because we don't exegete or teach the Bible or Scripture properly. So, for instance, when you talk about people talk about breaking vows, I've heard it preached, and I've heard some of my colleagues talk about Matthew chapter 5, where Jesus is teaching about divorce, and where Jesus says, I don't like divorce. I wish you wouldn't divorce. The only time you really should be divorcing is because of an adultery. Actually, that is, if it's preached like that, that's absolutely wrong. Jesus was speaking to Jewish marriage, where you would get married almost the same as Catholicism. You would get married in the church, and then you would get married in the state. And a lot of times the husband would allow a wife to get divorced in the state, but he wouldn't allow her to get divorced in the church. So she would still, in effect, be married and couldn't be remarried in the church. So if she did live with someone else and get married, it would be called adultery. Jesus was speaking to, I think it is incumbent upon us as leaders to actually know the Jewish marriage, where you would get married almost the same as Catholicism. You would get married in the church, and then you would get married in the state. And a lot of times the husband would, God wants us to take care of the people that God has put in our lives to cover us, so to speak. Does that answer your question?
It does. And I have a question for you while we're here. And so for everybody's on, this is my pastor. Me and I have a lot of candid conversations, especially
too candid.
Yeah, when it comes to women and the Bible. But a big topic when you talk about a Proverbs 31 woman, and I think that gets kind of taken out of context a lot. But there's this idea of a woman must submit to her man. The man is the head, and can you speak to how that can could potentially be reasons as why people are in these situations and won't leave as well?
So that is a Paul issue that has long been used as a scripture of abuse. Isn't it funny how the word of God in the Bible is used and twisted to abuse, to subject, to and it's actually interpreted absolutely wrong. So that particular scripture that you're talking about is Ephesians, and Paul are talking to the Greek people. And in Greek, when he was talking to the church of Ephesus, when he tells, matter of fact, it says, wives, submit yourselves to your husbands. Husband, you are the head of the household. Christ is the head of the church. That word submit in Greek means, it doesn't mean what it means in English. When we hear submit or submission, it is actually negative, or it has a negative connotation. It means inferior, or it means quiet, meek, and numb. And that is not what Paul was actually talking about when he was referring to man and woman, man and wife. Actually, in Greek, the word submit, it doesn't even mean obey. It actually means to put under, to help carry. So when you look at it that way, to put under, if every man is the head of his household, as Christ is the head of the church, as a man, my job is to cover my wife, and she is to come under me, and I'm supposed to carry her and help cover her. And that covering means to pray for it, to provide for it, to listen, to be an ear, to be an example, to be everything that Christ is to the church. You know, we get the submission thing right, we get the love, honor, and obey thing right, but a lot of times, you know, we don't get that, and that's why I love counseling married couples. I check a lot of misconceptions because we know those two scriptures, but we don't understand. It's okay that why you submit after you come under this guy, and he carries you, husband. You have a great responsibility. You are the love. What does love look like? Love looks like what I am to this church. So,
awesome. Thank you for that. And I want to kick it back over to Danielle because you brought up the point, God talks about man and woman, husband and wife, but domestic violence is also an issue when it comes to the LGBTQ community. And so, Silent No More, I know, addresses this, but can you talk about domestic violence and intimate partner violence within the LGBTQ community?
So directly impacting the LGBT community, I don't have the statistics for. However, we know domestic violence does not discriminate. Whether you are in a same-sex marriage or relationship, whether it's two women or two men, it's the same exact effects. However, I do see an increase of the women, with the women or the lesbian relationships or the bisexual relationships that have come into the shelters that are asking for assistance, even through us. We see an increase in that. But as far as the statistics for it, the numbers, I don't have that for you tonight.
No, that's okay. I think the biggest thing is to know that this is it is not a straight or heterosexual issue. It is not a gay issue, a lesbian issue, but it's an intimate partner issue, and the power struggles and things and manipulation that goes in between. So I just wanted to highlight that.
And the same with the teens, the same with the high schoolers as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to go back to Lieutenant Taylor. You had talked about some protective orders. What if somebody has taken a step to say, hey, I'm going to get out of this thing, what steps can they take legally to help them in this process?
Okay, there's a couple of things they can do. First, they can reach out to the victim assistance. I have a phone number, and that would be 317-327-3331. They will assist you in going about getting a protective order. Okay, then you got the Julian Center, which is 317-941-2200. They will also assist you in getting a protective order. You can get on the computer, and a lot of people don't have access to the computer, but it'd be www.nd.gov, and you can do a protective order on the computer now. So those are several ways that you can, go about trying to get a protective order. Also, you can call the domestic violence unit. We will assist also in trying to help any victim get a protective order. So there's several ways you can go about doing it. All you gotta do is reach out, and somebody's going to help you, because that's what we're here for. So.
And does the domestic violence unit, do you have like a specific number to call?
Yes, it's 317-327-1210. That's my number. So if I'm not on the phone, just leave a message and I will get back to you. So I try to make sure that anybody that calls get the assistance they need, because, domestic violence is life and death. It's really a serious thing. So every case got to be treated very seriously.
Absolutely. So Danny, I know you spoke a little bit about your story on some of the signs that you missed, but with Lieutenant Taylor talking about some ways to protect yourself when you're leaving, can you talk to us about what were your steps in leaving, and how did you go about that process?
Absolutely. It was really, honestly, reconnecting to what I knew was whole love. I knew that the situation I was in was not a good one. And so was looking at what is the comparison to that? What's the flip side? Where have I found help? Maybe that's through my church. Maybe that's through this community organization I'm affiliated with. Maybe that's, I have one lifeline, a best friend that I could call, somebody that I know. And the thing is it was realizing, you're not going to get the help that you need from the people that are in your same situation. That's the misery that loves company, that don't mind you being in the same boat, and is going to tell you to hold on. That's why I said it was reconnecting to what is love actually, and how can I put a lifeline out to that? Because we don't put enough emphasis on really doing work on ourselves and really getting to know who we are, what our voice is, what we truly want, what makes us happy versus the things that make us sad. And when we sometimes it takes getting knocked down to that low place, and that can very much be your domestic violence circumstance that really gets you at a bottom perspective, where you really begin to see who you actually are. And you say, what, this is my life. How did I get here? How did I get here, and how did I get out? And it's really, because I'm a compliance expert, I do a lot of risk assessments, and it's root cause analysis. It's the 5 whys, and that's how you get to the bottom of a situation. Is I need to ask why am I here? And then when I ask that question, when I realize I'm here, well, because I got caught up with the wrong people. Why did I get caught up with the wrong people? Well, because I wanted to be with somebody. Well, why did I want to be with somebody? Because I felt like something was missing within myself. And I didn't realize that I had it all together just being me. And so what I did is allow someone to basically take advantage of a vulnerability that I had in myself. But what does that mean? The answer is you got to repair the vulnerability. Because the reality is that no matter how you get out of that situation physically, you can have Lieutenant Taylor help you get out of whatever situation it is that you're in, but you end up right back in it if you don't fix those issues that drew you to that circumstance to begin with. And so it's really saying sometimes that's counseling. Some people don't have the resources to get to counseling, to be able to continue that. Maybe you're afraid to go to the person that you're directly connected to. And that's where you have places like Daniette's organization, Silent No More, where you have somebody that maybe looks like you, somebody that can relate to you in some way that may not be directly attached to you. You feel comfortable going to find the help that you need. And that's where I personally, if I can speak on this, because I know faith is what kept me through this. And yes, some people have a twisted perspective of faith. Faith without works is dead. You can believe that a person is going to change all they want, but if they don't put in the action, show the effort, show the initiative, and bring some fruit from their labor, then I'm sorry, you can have all the faith you want. It's not going to happen. And you have to be okay with that. There's an aspect of us that desires to control other people by wanting them to do the thing that we feel is right. And the reality is that we have to accept that person may never change who they are. It's not our job to change them. We want so bad. And that's why sometimes we might call a Lieutenant Taylor and then not follow through with pressing charges. And then what? You end up back in that situation. We say, you know what? I'm going to give them a second chance. I want them to be a better person. And you know what? That is a flaw within you. That's hopeful in some sense. And we have to really go back and say, you know what? Who am I? I deserve. That's where we recalibrate ourselves. And you have to look at the people that are around you. And that's what I did, is really begin to look at my circle, and I begin to see a pattern of abuse all around me. And the thing is it's not always physical. I saw it on my job. I saw how I was being manipulated in various ways. I saw it in my friend groups, how people would, it was kind of like an eye for an eye thing, where if you do this for me, you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. And I begin to really tear down what my view and perspective of what a whole and real love is. And from there, I began to rebuild that around who's always been there. Maybe that for some people, that's not your family. For others, that is your family. I know my family always been there for me. So at the end of the day, when I need a real and pure love, I might shut everybody out, but I might focus on, you know what, I'm just going to take some time to my family. For some people, that's your kids. And you say, you know what, I'm just going to take some time to pour into my kids. And that's where we focus on accentuating the positive within ourselves. And we don't realize how much that restores within each of us this beauty. And it's this realization like, wow, you know what, I do have more to offer. I do deserve better than what I've been getting. I should press charge. I do need to move forward with this. I do need to speak up. No, I can't sit back in silence. That's not okay for me to just take this. No, I'm sorry about your reputation. I know you don't want nobody to know about what you're doing behind the sheets and under the covers, but at the end of the day, because of who I am, there's something about me that can't let the next person go through this. There's something about me that knows this little girl over here is watching, and she sees. And I have to be the example. I have to be the change that I wish to see. Domestic violence isn't about going out and fixing all the bad people who want to beat up women. It's about fixing, and this is, like you said, it's not just women getting beat up. It's men out here getting demeaned and talked down to and torn apart and reputationally shredded. And sometimes those are the very ones going out and perpetuating the cycle of abuse, and they're physically abusing women because what another woman did to them mentally. And that's why I said we have to build each other up. We are kings and queens, and until we decide to see each other, and that starts within ourselves. We have to see ourselves as such, and then we'll be able to project that outwardly. And then other people won't be intimidated by us because we esteem them. But I have to know who I am first. So that was my first step out. Was, Danielle, who are you? This ain't it. You may not know exactly who it is, but this ain't it. And if you need to get in that still small space by yourself in order for you to check this out and figure out who that is, then you do just that. I don't care who don't understand. Your friends might not get it. I can't answer all your calls. I won't return all your texts. But at the end of the day, baby, the me you gonna get after I get through this transformation. It's something about it that can't be compared. And I know that doesn't give somebody something tangible, but if you would just reach for the higher part of you that says, I deserve better than what I've been allowing, what I've been tolerating, this aspect of strength that I had, it ain't working no more. That's a played out view. Part of the silence, yes, is perpetuated by faith, but part of the silence is perpetuated by a history of slavery, where we used to be killed. We were tormented and abused physically for speaking up. And we have to recognize the freedoms that we have today in 2020 to be able to have a voice and utilize it. Part of that, for some people, is just starting with talking about, I need to have a conversation with somebody. Do you know this crazy no good beat me up? I'm trying to decide what I'm going to do. Sometimes you got to talk your way through because you got to be wise. I didn't just leave my situation. I didn't just up and run. I planned that thing out because why? My safety was more important. When I realized who I was and I knew what I deserved, I coordinated with the people that I trusted around me to be able to formulate an exit plan to make my escape and never go back. And I didn't. This is just my story of survival. I hope that it helps somebody out there in some way. But the message is just that you can do it. I don't care what you feel like you're up against, what your excuse is. It's simply that. It's an excuse. There is always a way of escape. For every temptation, every issue that you've gotten yourself into, every aspect of bondage that you felt. Some people, you feel stuck financially. I'm stuck in this job. I'm stuck with this person because I don't have the money. Maybe you lost your job because of COVID, and I'm stuck in this house with somebody I know I ain't got no business being with. Baby, it's a way of escape for you. Contact me. That's what my business does. I help people find that creative gift within themselves, like Rochelle, so you can go write poetry and make some money off your poems, baby, because it's value inside of you. You don't gotta look to nobody for nothing.
Yes, you got the chat. Like they are loving it, and I hope that you guys. We got a couple more minutes here of the moderated questions, and at the end, you guys that are here are going to get to ask follow-up questions to everybody here. So keep those questions, and we'll ask for them. But thank you for sharing that. We may have to end up doing a part 2 with you, girl. I'm gonna throw that to Kentoya for a potential follow-up. But I did want to get to Linnell Beatty. In your intro, your bio, you mentioned that you had domestic violence impact your family. So if you could talk to us about that, but also what are things that people can do to help families that are dealing with domestic violence?
Yes. In 2008, my husband's only sister, her name was Allison Beatty. Allison Lynn Beatty. She lived in Dayton, Ohio. You can Google her and you will see her story. She was killed by her live-in boyfriend at the time. She had decided to get out, and she had made an escape plan, and he called her and said, I just want to talk to you. I just want to talk. And she had she had 4 children. Her 2 youngest children, he was their father. And those 3 children went to day camp, and the oldest she had just dropped off at work, and he told her, just come back, I just want to talk to you. And so he tricked her to come back to the house just to talk, and he beat her to death. Mm-hmm. And that was on July the 16th, 2008. Because she was my husband's only sister, she was my son's auntie. That was their auntie Allison, their Aunt Allison. And it was a very, when I tell you, it just ripped our family apart from that one day. Now, she had been with him for 7 years. And when she met him, she was a homeowner. She had a nice job. She had a nice car. And at the end of that 7th year, when he killed her, she literally had nothing. And so, although we had tried to help her, it was, I believe Danielle said, or maybe Daniette said that victims often feel sorry for the abuser. And so she felt sorry for him and would always take up for him when he would do something to her or whatever. And so when that happened, her children, her youngest, they were 3 and 4 years old. And on that day, they lost both their mother and their father. One is now 18, and one is 16. And her oldest 2, I forgot how old they are, but they're grown, and they're all doing fairly well. But I tell you that, yeah, there were signs there. And as the family, we felt hopeless and helpless because there was nothing that we could do. And then we also felt guilty. Did we not do enough? How could we have helped? And so one of the advocates told us that when children witness this firsthand, that a lot of times, especially the young ladies, they will end up having abusive men in their lives as they get older. That's the type of man that they will look for. And we have tried and tried and tried to steer them in the right way, and they have came back. They're doing better. But even, like I said, it was in 2008. It still affects us today in 2020. And what I want to say is that death is permanent. And one of the things that the advocates also said was that, it starts as just a slap or a push, and then they're very sorry. But the longer you stay, the worse it will get. And someone will end up or could end up dead, like Allison Beatty did in July of 2008. And so, yes, domestic violence is very, very real. And so I want to say that again. Love doesn't punch you in the face. But it's not always just physical. It's emotional, it's mental, it's financial. Like I said, she was a homeowner. She had a nice job. But at the end, she literally didn't have any of that. And so it was over the course of 7 years. And the family was, we still haven't been the same.
Hello?
And it's very important for counseling. Go into therapy. Get work through it with someone professional. Because, see, people on the outside oftentimes will tell us what we should do, what we should have done, what we could have done. But until you living in that situation, you don't know what you would do. And so if I don't say anything tonight, if there's anyone on here, if you are in a situation like this, death is final. You don't want your kids to grow up without their mother or their father. You don't want no one's going to love you like your mother. You don't want your kids to lose that. It's real and it's final. And you want them to have you in their life forever, as long as you can be. And not by the cause of someone else taking your life.
Hey, can you make sure they put both orders of French fries in
Jasmine,
there?
I don't know if I answered your question or not.
You did.
Can you give me two?
And I know that's not. I know
mayonnaise
that's
in a
not
cup of
easy to
9 packets?
discuss, but I think that's so important. We heard from survivors, but to hear from family,
Okay,
and to
thank
know
you,
that
Ed.
you're still. That was in
Thank you.
2008. It's 2020, and you're still going to be dealing with it going forward. So thank you for sharing your story. And there can be people on here today that may be experiencing that or know somebody. So that's why we need to hear it. I know it's jarring. Death is final, but it is. And so whatever we can do to motivate you, whether it's inspire you, scare you, something to get you out of your situation. So thank you for sharing. Again, we're going to do a Q&A at the end.
I will
But
be
now we're
coming
going
upstairs
to
in 30
move with the
minutes.
program. And we have a very special poet who's going to be doing a piece for us. His name is Khalid Muhammad, also known as Country Verse. He is an eclectic poet that sets the stage as one down-to-earth spoken word artist. His heady mixture of city verse, country roads has many audiences glued to their seats. His words can cut you like a knife, or they can caress you like a mother's hand. Every existential example of his writing exhibits his dramatic evolution from a boy to a man. He's a talented young man that has even turned his prayers into tear-jerking soliloquies. And if we could have Khalid and give virtual claps as he comes and presents to us today.
Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
All right. So the name of this piece is called Battlegrounds. She leaves work, the hustle and bustle of her 9 to 5, her office trappings, her own personal sanctuary. Keying the unlock button on her remote, she enters her vehicle, throwing on her favorite La DCCD. She readies her mind for the upcoming battle. The battle that plays out daily behind the locked doors of her home, or rather the place she used to call home, but as of late has become a war zone. What zone for cohabitation has now been zoned for this endless war of words? Explosive bursts of narratives litter the living room like rock party residue. impelled by exclamation, damaged by defamational caricatures of her. These wounding words leap from his lips as ballerinas tossed by muscled men seem to defy gravity for mere moments, to land with the impact of mortar rounds, but with a more explosive sound, creating craters in the psyche of the targeted person. Yes, her person, personally attacking her persona, shattering her self-image, sending shards slicing through her very soul. Given her given name, or should it be Ginsu? Because how can I begin to describe for you the bloodless battering of his beastly barrages, brazenly breaking down her defenses, once defenseless, piercing with the precision of a surgeon through her toughened epidermis, searching for her innermost fears to hurt them, not caring that this is the same person that they vowed they would love forever back then, back when this story began, back when coming home was the best part of her day, back when the sparkle in his eyes made her feel weightless, back when loving words were the only words he would say, back before she began to hate this, coming home to battlegrounds, manifested out of rooms made for living, moving into rooms manufactured for manufacturing meals, gathering round tables, getting sustenance, not suffering this barrage of insults. Those deadly darts dancing across his lips, dealing out death like Vegas blackjack dealers, dying only internally, a little more with each phrase, toting a lot more with each day, wondering why God hadn't thrown in the towel with each prayer, wondering where was her God, the one that granted her life. Does he not witness her strife, the stifling of her soul's breath? With inhaled breath comes the reloading of his clip. He nods his head as if in agreement with the way that his last sting of stinging words hit. But in reality, he's just cocking back to spit his last licks. Once done, he walks away, done for the day, like that's it, leaving her in a state of confusion, emotionally battered and bruised with no physical contusions, not realizing that this dying inside was just the gestation period God set to give her life a different conclusion, and knowing that for her to be rebuilt, she needed to be torn down first. He was only using him to do it. He was merely the pebble tossed in her pond to start its movement, testing her faith to see if she would grab the instruction manual and peruse it, leaving her only two options, hoping that the right path was the one that she would choose to pursue with his blessing, and she will breathe again, and the passing of her test then. Before she knows it, she is done. She has fired off the first of many vocal rounds that will stun, then turn him around. We are through. I want you out by tomorrow. As for tonight, you and the couch can work that out. I'm going to bed. The bedroom door closes, drowning out his useless red cross words. The baby's "I'm sorry" is then marked by miles. Behind the door, she is collapsed into tears. Her eyes a torrent. The questions start as the first lands. What am I going to do now? But just as soon as they are asked, the answers hit. Woman, I made you to be who you are. You won this battle. Now let's win this war of these hallowed battlegrounds.
Awesome. Claps and snaps. Thank you so much for sharing that powerful piece. I am going to, before I go, how can people, if they want to hear your music, hear your poetry or follow you on social, are you on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook? How can people find you?
I do have a Facebook page. It's Countryverse on Facebook as well. I'm actually working on a few, putting together a book as we speak. Got a few other pieces. Haven't as of yet gotten back into it. It's been a while since I've actually put my work out there, but it is on Facebook, and I am uploading more as we go along. This kind of COVID-19 situation has kind of re-sparked that for me.
Understood. Okay, so Facebook, look up Countryverse so you can check out more of his work. Thank you so much. Okay, now I'm going to pass it over to Sora Nairi Humpert, who's going to be giving away some art through a raffle. So, Sora Humpert, if you could come on and show your video and announce.
Oh, okay. Good evening, everyone. We have two paintings to raffle off at this time, that has been donated by an artist named Cora Najir, who was also a domestic violence survivor. Again, we thank her so much for her donations of both beautiful pieces. The first raffle winner would be Shanita Lackey. She will receive the first piece of art, which is called Through the Eyes of Domestic Violence. Through the Eyes of a Domestic Violence Victim. The second piece of art, which is called Through the Eyes of a Domestic Violence Survivor, will go to Timothy Beatty Sr. Congratulations to both winners.
Awesome. Thank you. And how will you get those items to them?
Both those items will be delivered to you guys. Kim Toya Sam will work with both people to make sure that they are delivered their art pieces. And we will have one more raffle coming up soon.
Okay. Thank you so much. Okay. So now it is time for the Q&A. So if you have questions for any of the panelists, faith-based, regarding the legal system, about Silently No More, about being a survivor, dealing with families, please drop those questions in the chat right now. And then we'll make sure that we ask them. While we're waiting on some questions, Danica, I'm going to come back to you since we had audio difficulty earlier. But I'm going to ask you to talk about how do we overcome the stigma of seeking help, whether it's therapy or what have you.
Can you hear me this time?
Yes.
Yay! Okay, so stigma in itself, I wanted to first give a definition of what stigma is, and that it's a cluster of negative attitudes and beliefs that motivate the public to fear, reject, avoid, and discriminate against certain people that has been labeled with differences. So stigma alone is the biggest barrier to individuals seeking treatment. So it therefore is the biggest barrier to recovery. So I also wanted to just point out that when it comes to stigma, although it says to the public, it can be an inward and as well as an outward issue. You can have your own personal stigmas, your own personal biases that prevent you from doing things, as well as what you project, what others project onto you. So when it comes to domestic violence or treatment alone or mental health, it's always that stigma of the language that people use, whether it's embarrassment or you're labeled a certain kind of way, so that stops people from seeking what they need to get help. So overall, some of the things that we can do is to, education and awareness is the first and the foremost. What's important, knowing when it's a mental health issue, educate yourself or educate those around you on what that is. A mental health issue is no different from a physical health issue. So if you have a physical health issue, you're going to go seek treatment. So it's no different from that. And if you can talk openly about your mental health, you are not your diagnosis. If you have cancer, you're not cancer. You're someone living with cancer. So the same as with the mental health issue, you're someone living with a mental health issue, or you're someone involved in a domestic violence situation. So getting past those barriers are key. Showing compassion for those that are around you with the mental health issue. Choose empowerment. Choose empowerment over shame. A lot of shame comes to those with the mental health issue, as well as a domestic violence issue, that people place on, like I think I said before, the embarrassment or those things that come along with those situations. Speak out against the stigma. If you are around someone that's being negative about it, speak out. Use your voice. Even if it's,
on social media, or if you're watching a television show and someone says something, that you don't like, write the broadcasters and say, hey, that was inappropriate, it's wrong, use your facts, and use your voice. So one of the things I wanted to kind of go back to, a question that you asked Danielle real quick, is about, and when it comes into a stigma, I wanted to put into play, like, if you are in a situation, or and how to get out of that situation, whether you're ready to do it right now or whether you are planning to do it, make a plan, have a plan, and then in that plan, it comes for you as well as your children. You have to think of both levels. Making a safety plan, and a safety plan involves identifying a safe friend, a safe place to go. I put in there the Indiana Coalition Against the Violence Helpline. Daniette's place Silence No More. There's a lot of Julian Center. So identifying a safe place. Keeping an alternate cell phone handy that your abuser does not know about. Memorize phone numbers of friends and families. I know we're in the age of technology and everything's right there at our fingertips. But memorize some certain numbers that you can call in case of an emergency. Make a list of things that you must take with you quickly. If you have extra set of car keys, hide your spare. So you can, in case your keys are taken, you got your spare. If you or your children are on medication, ask your doctor how to get extra medication or any medical necessity items that you may need later on. Contact your local courts. I believe the lieutenant or someone talked about, like, as far as like restraining orders, protective orders, protecting your online security. And this is very important right now because we are in this day and age of everybody's online and those kinds of things. And so what that means is, like, your digital footprint, I believe is what it's called, can follow you. So if you need to do anything to download documents or do anything of that nature, do it from a different, go to the library, use your friends, don't use your own personal things because you can be traced. Let me see what else. I want to try to be quick so I don't hold up a lot of time. Take any evidence of any abuse with you. Your documents, threatening notes, emails, police records, medical records, pictures of injuries or damages. Take all that with you. If you have children, or if this goes to, even if you're not the person in this room right now, or you know someone, these are things that you need to tell them. Listen and talk to your children and let them know that the abuse is not okay and it's not their fault. And then I also wanted to say, during your planning, keep quiet about your plan. Don't even say it to your children because they can accidentally say, well, we're planning to do this, we're planning to do that. Keep quiet. You do not want your abuser to accidentally learn about your plan. Only talk to trusted adults about your plan. So just all that kind of goes hand in hand with the stigma that you gotta have a plan and you gotta break down those barriers and those biases to get treatment and get into recovery or whatever it is that you need.
Perfect. Thank you so much for that list. Somebody did ask how important are safety plans, and I think you really did a good job at outlining things to consider. You should have a safety plan and consider all those things. I have a question here for Lieutenant Taylor. Have you seen a direct correlation between the pandemic and a rise in domestic violence rates?
Yes, unfortunately, we have. Let's give you a little data. Last year, this time, we had, for this quarter, we had 1,316 cases come through the domestic violence unit in 2019. In 2020, we've had 674 cases come through. So it's definitely having an effect on domestic violence. Also, as you guys, if you watch the news and everything, homicides also. So, yes, absolutely.
Thank you for answering that. I have a question from Alyssa that says, is there anything that you wish your friends would have done differently while you were in that domestic violence situations? And that'll go to our survivors on the call. Whoever wants to answer first, just go and unmute and do your thing.
All right, I'll go first. For that situation, no, just because my friends were not aware or educated, shall I say, on the abuse. Like I said, when I had my high speed chase, my friend was with me. So it was both of us. So if your friend is uneducated or doesn't have the resources, majority of the times they just come in with you in that abuse, and they like what you love. But I don't think back then I would have changed what my friends did, just because my friends, they drew away, which was a good thing for what I was going through then. Just because they didn't understand, they were not educated to even help me. So that's kind of where I am as far as changing it. But now, I love them to death. They're very educated now and know what to do.
Right. Is there anyone else that would like to answer that question? If not, that's okay. But just unmute.
I'll just say a quick word. I really had to, in my circumstance, I had to change my perspective of what my expectations were of others. And so I can say personally, no, I don't think my friends needed to do something different. In a situation like that, if your friends are not able to support you, you have to respect that they are where they are and perhaps going through whatever their own little issue is, and that might not be who is for you. You would rather know that before you're in a position where you need to depend on them than when you're actually in that role where I need you to be there and you're not. So I would say really lose your expectations around, people don't have to be there. That's just the reality of life. People don't have to be there. And that's why I focus this so much on, yes, there are resources. Take advantage of the resources that you have when you have them. But the reality is that, the value is in you. And so you have an obligation to protect yourself. And then obviously if you have children, that extends to your children as well. And so it's, less necessarily looking outward, but trusting that everything, the one that created you, if God created you and he placed you here and there's some sort of purpose for you being here, then you have to trust that he's made provision for you to have everything that you need, regardless of whether the people around you support you in the way you feel you need to be supported or not. So a lot of times in those situations, like I said, release the expectation of friends or family doing or reacting a certain way. I think I expected that, when I told my friends that they would be a certain way, but it was kind of very nonchalant. And I have to realize where they, there was some being desensitized by the way of the world with them as well. And they have been through a lot of things of their own. So, release your expectation around that. Trust that God is going to connect you as you reach, as you seek, as you say, hey, this is something that I want to do, and you commit to offering yourself and your children and your family a better life, that you're going to connect with those resources that you need to be able to do so.
Thank you so much for that. And that actually leads to another question that was asked. How can I, as a community member, neighbor, friend, family member, co-worker, acquaintance, be more vigilant against domestic violence?
For me, I would say, if you see something, say something. And that doesn't mean say something to the violence, meaning say something to the abuser or walk up to the victim. That means pick up the phone and call 911. And if you don't want your information to be seen just because you're the neighbor, then push *67, because it'll still pop up anonymous. They may have a little, back end where they still find out. But however, you'll do your job as far as being a neighbor or community person with reaching out to IMG and getting that call to them, not knowing where that call came from, but someone came to rescue and be a voice for whoever that victim is. And also grab some resources. Always have them, in your home. So that way, if do see a social media post where a victim is trying to flee but don't have anything, you have that resource right there. You can inbox her or inbox them real quick, and bam, you have resources. You was just another voice for somebody. But trying to step into the situation is definitely dangerous, and I don't condone it at all.
Okay, thanks. We got 3 questions that I want to get to. 4 questions that I really want to get to before we run out of time here. The next one I'm going to direct at Damika. How, as a parent, can you help your child who may be involved in domestic violence situation or marriage without aggravating or agitating the situation for them?
I think primarily support, because, but I think as Danielle and Danielle both said, is that you have to be careful in those situations, because if you do too much or overstep, it can trigger more violence towards your child. So you have to be careful in that way. And then you also have to know that, unfortunately, everybody is not ready to leave those situations, and they have to kind of do it at their time. So resources is key. You know, if they come to you and talk to you, you know, you can ask, how can I be of assistance? Here's some resources, and providing those things. But then also too, if you don't know, if you're not sure what's going on, someone kind of asked about signs and, you know, symptoms and stuff like that. You can look for signs within your adult child or whatever. You know, has there been an increase in drug or alcohol use, or feelings of hopelessness, or worthlessness? Those are some signs and symptoms to look for if you're unsure. And then kind of act upon those things and just try to, like you said, offer the resources, provide, you know, get some counseling for them if they're open to it, but just treading carefully not to increase or make the situation worse for them.
Thank you for sharing that. That actually hit 2 questions. So thank you for that. Michelle, we haven't heard from you. So I'm going to put this question to you. Because you've been through domestic violence, how does this impact your interpersonal interactions with new people that you meet?
What's the worst that can happen? There you go. Okay. Here. I'm just letting you know. Can you find one?
With my interactions with new people because of my domestic violence, is the question you're asking, right?
Yep.
Well, my interaction now, I would say it has gotten a lot better. Before I was very timid because I didn't know how to react to people, because I was always kept with my spouse. I was never allowed to interact with anyone. So I had to relearn how to interact with people. And now that I'm able to, I'm always uplifting, showing them that there is a way out in whatever situation that they're in.
Thank you so much. So somebody did ask, what are some signs that you should look for when it comes to domestic violence? And this could be either as a, you know, the person experiencing the violence, or maybe somebody from the outside. And I'll just let whoever would like to speak up here.
I'll speak up. Some of the things I just kind of mentioned, if over a dependence of drugs and alcohol, excessive or inappropriate feelings of guilt, if they're starting to have trouble making decisions, feelings of worthlessness, suicidal tendencies,
Jordan, come here.
unable to complete tasks, withdrawing from friends and social situations. That could be, I think Linnell put it in the thing that the abusers isolate them. So if you see them beginning to withdraw from you all, dramatic, you know, shifts in their moods, physical abuse, you know, that you can actually see.
Have you taken a shower?
Broken bones,
Are your clothes out?
bodies, those kinds of things. I'll open it up if somebody else wants to add to it.
I'll add to it real fast
Look in
because
the
I was
bottom drawer
totally
and then
opposite
get a
of
clear
every
sleeve.
single thing that she said. And I was that one that could walk into church and sit on that sanctuary pew and praise the Lord as if my life was great. And I would be that one to go to work, and I was the happiest one in there with a smile because I knew that the darkness was at home. But when I left at home, that I can take my light and I can, so no one knew. Absolutely no one knew that I was going through domestic violence, and I shielded. So I think it also, if you, if the spirit is telling you something, or if there is an intuition that you feel like there is some abuse, but you just can't see it, it goes back to relationships and just that, that common conversation, and eventually that person will start to talk and say things for you, because I was silent. I definitely was silent and had a smile. Silent with a smile.
Thank you. So the last question I'm going to ask here, and if you have more questions, any of the panelists may respond to you in the chat. But this was touched on, but I really want to ask this question. Should a friend of the victim report domestic violence situation even if the victim is not ready to get out? If we keep silent, aren't we just as guilty if it ends in tragedy? So I don't know if Danny, you want to tackle that one?
Yeah, I just have a quick remark to say to that. And this is why so much, even in my businesses, I focus very much on nourishing the self, because everything in life, every decision that we make, every choice that we make is a matter of a judgment call. It's making a decision. And the more we get to know who we are, and the more we really allow, like I believe in God, maybe you believe in something different, but the more we allow whatever it is that created us to really cultivate within us, the value that lies within, we are better, we realize our ability to sense. And some people call it the Holy Spirit, some people call it your intuition, whatever it is. It's like a little light bulb that goes off inside of you that says, it's kind of like when we see someone we don't know, and something says, say hi, and we ignore it. And I'd rather look the other way and divert my eyes because I don't want to speak to nobody. It's following those type urges. And this is, again, purely my opinion. So, take it with a grain of salt. But domestic violence and its prevention and being able to fix it is largely in just approaching things from a different perspective. It's not saying, I'm going to go in here like Superman and save the day and point out all the victims. It's really connecting with people in a way that establishes relationship and creates a safe place between you and them, so that if they have a need, and remember, this is not just a one-way street, it's reciprocal. You need to get back to a better place of building reciprocal relationships and say, if you have a need, I got your back. If I have a need, you got my back. And when we do that, we create a partnership and a bond there, so that when I'm in a situation, I already know we've already cultivated this, so I can go to you. With this, I learn ways in which I can trust. We form partnerships. It's getting back to community and forming relationships in that way is really, really how we are able to make those decisions. And then when you're in that situation, you can see your friend and say, you know what, I'm going to call. Or maybe it's just dropping a hypothetical question. I used to do that sometimes because I've had other friends who said, what would you do if I called the police and I reported them? You know what I mean? And it's you got to know your relationship with that person. It would be impossible to just blanket say, yes, you need to report every single time, because some of you have wisdom and insight to other factors that are involved. There could be children that really need to have some sort of, like you said, preparing a safety plan. That doesn't mean everything's going to be perfect, but that's a part of the plan. Is even the family. How can I plan to support? How can I plan to be? Everybody has an aspect in that. When you see it, what's my plan to head this off? Maybe I'm not the person actually coming in and removing them from the situation, but I'm just going to continue to provide a safe space. Every time I see her, I'm going to say, hey, how you doing? I'm going to create a forum that's comfortable for that person to be able to really confide in me. And maybe today is not the day for them to be able to do that, but tomorrow I'm going to be back again, providing that shoulder that they can cry on, that listening ear. And it's just really fostering a sense of relationship and availability, so that when that time comes, we have shown that we're here for it by being friendly.
Yes, thank you so much for sharing that. It's really all about relationships. So that was the last question for the Q&A. Thank you, panelists, so much for your time. We are going to wrap up the event here with some spoken word from one of our survivors, Lachelle. If you could grace us with your spoken word, and then we'll have our president, Adrian Woods, closing remarks for the event. And you are muted.
Hi. I did write this last night, so the title was Suffering in Silence. You said for better or for worse, death do us part. Was that a fable? Saying all the right things and making all the wrong moves. I was an unprotected queen in your selfish game of chess. A wife is what you label me as, but what is that? Did you cherish me and protect me? Silently, I try to piece together the examples I had of being what I said I do too. Wanted to please with being slapped and knocked off the imaginary foundation I built for myself. Feeling the burn from my tears and the lava escaping your lips. Listen to the elders say, child, you made your bed, now you got to lie in it. Or half a man is better than no man. I'm lost in this hurts. But the vows, I said for better, for worse. So much pain and so much sorrow. Okay, I'll stay. We got to raise this child. She needs her daddy. I said for better, for worse. The slaps get harder and marks are left, but I can take it. For better, for worse, right? Perhaps if I keep quiet and suffer in silence, there would not be a death. For only death would do us apart, was a vow I took. But no more suffering in silence. I'm tired. See, there is something better, there is something new, and I found it. I am the better, I am the new, a renewed mind. I'm sorry. I will no longer be a victim, for I am a conqueror in this game of chess. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing virtual snaps and claps. That was wonderful. I meant to announce that we did go ahead, because of time, do the last raffle, and it looks like it was a $25 gift card that went to Alyssa Rogan, so congrats to her. And again, thank you to the panelists. Adrian Woods, if you would come on and take us out.
So, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. So just thank you again to everyone who joined the call tonight. I just want to say I definitely hope and pray that you were able to learn something today from this call and at least become more aware of this important topic. Also, just ways that we can help out the community. In the chat, I believe there were multiple phone numbers that were listed, organizations that you can reach out to, and I'm pretty sure that we will definitely put those on our social media pages to share. So if you have any additional comments while I'm talking or sharing, definitely please put those in there so we can share those. And then lastly, I would just like to thank our panelists, our poets, and our donors. And a special thanks to the Iota Zeta Chapter Community Service Committee for definitely organizing this event. It was very great, very informative, and like I said again, just hope that you were able to learn something tonight. And thank you again for tuning in, and good night. Bye.